Hello and welcome to a conversation at the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller. Today, joined by a really cool guest from an amazing organization called FracTracker Alliance. And she's going to tell us what that's all about, what they do, how you can use it to affect positive change. Shannon Smith, how you doing, Shannon?
I'm good. Thanks, Eric, for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for taking some time to talk with me. I discovered your organization. I was looking at the pledge for My Climate President. There's a lot of organizations that sort of signed on to, sort of tenets of, environmental principles that, any president, Joe Biden ultimately ended up being, that should be, forced to work on or sort of be in favor of and so forth. And, your organization jumped out at me, and I went to the website, and which I'll pull up here in a minute, and it is a treasure trove of information. It's really incredible. Like I don't want to spoil it, but I'll pull it up, and there's all kinds of resources there. But and I'll ask you about some of them. But just a little bit of history about FracTracker Alliance. Can you tell us how it started, when it started, what's the mission?
Sure. Yeah. There's no shortage of oil and gas issues to delve into. So if you want to spend some time on our site, you will have a lot to explore. But FracTracker Alliance started in 2010 as a project out of the University of Pittsburgh, and it grew into a nonprofit organization that it is today with 8 staff in 5 different offices across the country. So we do look at national level oil, gas, and petrochemical issues. And mainly what we do is we gather data and then we analyze that data and communicate it. So we're mostly looking at the health and environmental impacts of fracking, but we also look at the petrochemical industry, and we do some analysis around renewable energy. And we, that's kind of our niche, is gathering that data, presenting it, and making maps for different groups, and communicating that to wide audiences and varied audiences across the country. So we work with people influencing legislation. We work with a lot of national nonprofits, local grassroots organizations, frontline communities, activists, folks like that who can use our sort of technical services. And then we also have a mobile app, which does have a web app component that's on our website. And through that app, people can kind of get a picture of just how vast the energy landscape is in the United States. So from the app, you can see a map of all of the drilled fracked wells, all of the pipelines, compressor stations, infrastructure like that. And I think for people who don't have, a high level of awareness, looking at that map can just be kind of shocking to see the extent of it. And then users on the mobile app can submit their own reports. So if they see something that's concerning to them, say it's like a pipeline that's leaking or something like that, they can submit an app report, and everyone who uses the app can then see that. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, that's great, and I want to pull up the website so to show some of that, because it is really striking. Like we hear, until you see it, you hear about fracking and the impacts and so forth, but to see it, as a layer on a map, and just the vastness of it, and it's sliced and diced in a myriad of ways on your site. And again, I'll pull it up. I feel like I'm teasing it, right? Just before we show that, can you, and you're, I don't necessarily know your background, your area of expertise in terms of science and so forth, so if I ask you a question that's, maybe out of your scope, feel free to just smack me or whatever. But, do you have any sense of the footprints of, say fracking or the oil and gas industry 10 years ago versus now? What are the high level trends that you're aware of?
Well, it's interesting to look at this in the context of a changing federal administration, because the fracking boom in the United States really began around 2010, 2008, 2010. And so during the Obama administration, Obama kind of gave lip service to the renewable energy sector, while at the same time really making a favorable context for oil and gas, the oil and gas industry, and for fracking in particular. So from 2010 until quite recently, there was just a massive influx of fracking in the United States, especially in regions like Appalachia, where there's, the shale rock that produces the natural gas. And so now, especially in the COVID era, but even before then, the oil and gas and petrochemical industries in the United States have taken a really big hit. So there's definitely a decreased level of fracked natural gas production because in that boom, there created a huge oversupply of natural gas. And so then there was a price glut, which led to negative free cash flows for at least Appalachian shale companies for every single year for the past 10 years. So it has never been a profitable industry. And that's what I try to impress upon people, because there are a lot of false narratives around natural gas in the industry. So now, yeah, oil and natural gas and petrochemicals are really struggling right now. And we could talk about that more or celebrate that more if you want.
Right. Yeah, please. Yeah, please. And it's because of this sort of boon, and like you said, economically wise, you mentioned COVID. Why else is it dipping? And that's good to hear, but why, what other factors are contributing? And do they get subsidies? Does the fracking company specifically get subsidies?
Well, I mean, the oil and gas sector receives a huge amount of federal subsidies per year. I don't have the figure right on me, but they receive a really significant amount of federal subsidies, as well as indirect subsidies and other forms of aid. So imagine, where all of that support could be going to support our health sector and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But why are these industries sort of struggling right now and in decline? It's a little bit different for oil and natural gas and petrochemicals. But, the oil price war before COVID was kind of making American oil on edge. And I think a lot of that had to do with the international politics of oil, but also our storage capacity in the US. And so the year started out with, I don't know, oil was at something like $60, $65 a barrel. And now it's at like $47 a barrel. So there's just less oil being used. That's one factor.
Right.
The international context, that's another factor. And then for natural gas, yeah, it was that price glut and investors kind of wising up and pulling out. More and more high-level analysts, like the most credible analysts, even on the industry side, are finally kind of calling it what it is. And I think this is scaring away a lot of investors, especially international investors. And so to give a little bit of context on the American petrochemical industry, the Gulf Coast region right now has a huge petrochemical hub. And there have been plans in the works for the past few years to create a second major petrochemical hub in Appalachia. Mm-hmm. So kind of trying to take this natural gas feedstock that is not profitable and scramble to find some way to make it profitable. So years ago, when they started these plans for new ethylene cracker plants, which are part of plastic production, all these different pieces of infrastructure that go into plastic production based on natural gas. When they started these plans, their projections for the price of plastic, the demand for plastic, the price of natural gas, all these different factors that went into their projections are not as favorable for the industry as they had hoped. And so now they've been courting these international investors for years, and they're pulling out. In Belmont County, Ohio, a cracker plant is, currently in the works. Well, they're trying to get investors, but their investors just pulled out. There are different storage facilities that are having trouble trying to keep their investors. So that's kind of the national context right now. It's very clear and very evident that the industry is struggling.
That's wow. I'm happy to hear that. I was, I did not. It's news to me. That's amazing. We need to get that out there more. And so then that underscores, one of the things in, the general election was that was just straight out maddening was Joe Biden's full-throated being goaded into saying repeatedly, "I will not ban fracking," right? Which goes against even the economic trends that you're, communicating here. What's your industry? What's your reaction to him when he said that? And how does that look? What kind of hopes do we have for the next administration to keep that trend going? In the downward direction as you're describing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, of course, that was disheartening to hear, but I'm based in Pennsylvania, so I kind of understand, strategically what he was trying to do, who he was trying to pander to there. But Pennsylvania did end up going blue, so
right.
That was awesome to see. But yeah, so if you look at Biden's climate plan, he has this climate plan that also has energy revolution and environmental justice in the title of it. I know that. He doesn't call for a ban on fracking in that climate plan, as he made very clear, as you said, several times. But he does call for a ban on new fracking on federal lands. Excuse me. But that only accounts for a small portion of oil and natural gas production anyway, somewhere around 8%, 9%. So banning new fracking on those federal lands isn't going to have much of an impact. But if you look at his other climate targets, like I know he wants to reach zero net emissions, I think by 2050. He wants to have a totally clean energy economy. And if you look at these different goals that he set, fracking is not congruent with those goals. So it kind of implies a ban on fracking without stating that. And whether there's going to be the political willpower to actually implement this climate plan, we'll see. I've never put a lot of trust and hope into our federal administrations. Like I mentioned, even under Obama, who gave a lot of lip service to the renewable energy sector, instated some, he was not a climate champion. That's for sure. He really supported the oil and natural gas industries.
Yeah. So again, just focusing on that news that you just shared. So it makes me speculate, extrapolating into the future, that, the way politicians have pandered to coal miners, is this going to just be the next example of that for the years forthcoming, do you suspect?
Yeah, Joe Biden, well, good on him for winning Pennsylvania through whatever rhetoric he used. He definitely tried to appeal to the working class quite a bit in Pennsylvania. Right. And I think his recent appointment of Jennifer Graham, I can't remember her name, the energy secretary that was the former governor of Michigan. I know that she has a ton of experience in the auto industry. And so I think that's kind of a signal from Joe Biden that he's really going to be focusing on green manufacturing and continuing to appeal to labor groups and to the working class. And that also plays into his climate plan of focusing on clean transportation. So yeah, that is a signal to me that he's, trying to put his money where his mouth is, if that works.
Right. Great. Yeah, good. I sort of jumped on you on policy, so I didn't sort of prep you on that. I just wanted to, since you mentioned that, I thought that was super interesting. Obviously the bread and butter of why I want to talk to you is how awesome FracTracker is, right? So let me share the website, and I'll kind of let you guide me around a little bit, right? So it's fractracker.org, and there's just a ton of resources on here. The topics at the top, there's all kinds of maps, I'll click through a little bit, but is there anything in particular that you want me to maybe focus on?
Well, if you scroll down on the main page to our main national map that's featured down below, that national energy map, that's a great resource if you just want to get a general overview. That's kind of our most recent updated data. And you can see all the pipelines, you can see petrochemical facilities, you can see renewable energy infrastructure. There's a ton of data in these maps, so sorry if they load a little slow.
No, I should have loaded it in advance. It's ArcGIS you're using. Very cool. Yeah, and these, I'm assuming, yeah, you can show and hide various layers, so you can show, I'll let you speak. What are we looking at?
Yeah, well, this is a very comprehensive map, so it does have a lot of layers to it. On certain maps, we're not able to add, like nationally, all of the fracked wells, because it would just be way too many data points for one map. But yeah, you can explore, the different types of infrastructure that you're interested in, different regions, and that kind of, just helps to give you an idea of the trends. Like in the Midwest, you're going to see a lot of frac sand mining. In the Gulf Coast, you're going to see a lot of petrochemical activity. In Appalachia, and the different shale regions, like in the Southwest, you'll see a lot of fracking in those areas.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you also have these maps. So this is sort of, like you said, the comprehensive one, but I'll go back in a second. At the top of the site, there's all of these kind of individually as well. And, bear in mind the performance, we're doing this over a stream, so it might not be the greatest, quickest, smoothest performance that you would get if you went to it directly, just to throw that as a caveat, right? Yeah, so you mentioned Pennsylvania. So, I'm assuming these black lines, not looking at the key, are pipelines. These red ones are various other pipelines. So, yeah, absolutely incredible, this work. So let me go back to the top just to show that there are other. So there's national, international, various maps we can look at. And there's so many, like I wouldn't even know where to begin. I like that you showed us that comprehensive national petrochemical one here, but can you speak to a few of these here, these other ones that we have as options?
Yeah, well, first I want to mention that depending on what you come to the site for, we try to make the information available to the different kinds of groups that tend to be interested in these sorts of topics. So a lot of researchers or members of the media who come to our site, they might just be looking for the data sets. So we try to be really transparent and clear about where we get our data. And in fact, most of the data that goes into these maps is publicly available, but it's just a matter of knowing how to find it, where to find it, and then getting it into a format that's accessible to people. And just that in and of itself can take a lot of time. So if you go to maps and then the state maps, each state has its own page. And some states don't have very much fracking activity in them whatsoever. So it's going to be more activity in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, New Mexico, the Dakotas, that kind of thing. Wisconsin.
Oh, I see. Yep. Which one would you like me to go to? Pick a state, any state.
You can go to, well, why don't you go to Wisconsin? I want to see if it highlights frac sand mining as it should. Because that's an issue. I think you had mentioned that to me at some point, frac sand mining being an issue that is often overlooked. And so you can see the related articles on this Wisconsin state page where we go in depth on some of the issues surrounding frac sand mining. We show you a bird's eye view of it in map form, but also through aerial photography and aerial video footage, so that you can really see the impact and understand it through the data and through our analysis. So just that, we write these articles combining visualizations and maps and data to try to communicate just how much goes into fracking, the amount of water fresh water that's used to frack a single well, the amount of sand that goes into it, the amount of waste that's produced, which is oftentimes dangerously radioactive by the time that it's gone through the fracking process, all the different infrastructure that's involved. So, we really want to dispel the myth that natural gas, because it has the name natural, is somehow clean or, good for the climate. Yeah, that's a totally false narrative. Or looking at fracked natural gas as a bridge fuel to renewable energy is not valid in any way. I mean, I think that's just an industry talking point.
Are you suggesting the fossil fuel industry would use propaganda? I can't imagine such a thing.
Never. It's not like they've been promoting recycling and no carbon offset programs and that kind of thing. All kinds of false solutions.
Yeah. I wonder, and again, on the maps, and we're just scratching the surface. There's so much in here, and it's really incredible. It's the news, like you said, the articles. I wonder are there any layers about like regulatory layers? Do you have local EPA regulations that you can overlay, to show compliance and lack of compliance, any threshold data in terms of regulations and so forth?
That's super interesting. I mean, I'm going to write that down after this call because that would be a great map. Anytime, if anyone has mapping needs like that, seriously reach out to us, because that's why we exist. So I can't think of any maps that we have that are like that exactly, but if there's a frontline group, say in the Gulf South, that's working around, proposed crude oil export terminals, we can help them to look at exactly what's going on in that area and create maps that cater to their needs. So that's kind of more how we tend to work. But if you look under the topics tab there, you'll see kind of all of our areas of expertise, and our different staff members focus on, their own geographies for the most part. And some are, experts more so in some of these topics than others, but those kind of lay out our main areas of focus. And legislation is an area that we engage in and want to kind of delve into more in the coming year, because that's a very important way for people to engage in these issues, is to be aware of what's happening in their municipalities and in their states and on the federal level too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the app, obviously there's a web app here, and then there's an app that you can access on your mobile device, and you can crowdsource information, right? So if you're in the field, wherever you are in your neighborhood, and you see, an issue, you can take a photo of it, you can report it using the FracTracker app. Can you talk about that? And, how does that end up on these maps if it does?
Yeah, that information is all going to be on the web app. And we've used the app with community groups before to create sort of like digital atlases of specific watersheds to show more of a comprehensive view of the impact of fracking on a specific watershed. Groups have used it to hold regulators and companies accountable for things like pipeline construction and violations that might happen during that process. But I think on the website, I should know this, I think under Get Involved, under the Get Involved tab, I think that's where you'll find the app. Can't really see it in there, but there's a list.
It's my performance. It's my interwebs.
No worries. Well, if you look it up on the app, the App Store on iOS or Android, it's FracTracker, and you'll find it. And yeah, you can kind of get an idea of what other people are experiencing in their communities. And another tool that I would suggest for anyone who's already engaged in these issues or wants to become more engaged in these issues, network with people in your local, areas. There's inevitably some sort of energy issue happening near you. even if you live in a state where there's not a lot of fracking. And so try to get involved with the local groups. And one of our partner organizations actually just came out with a new and improved kind of directory of different environmental groups across the US.
That's great.
So that's really exciting. It's an amazing resource, and that is at halttheharm.net. And they have this leadership directory where there are hundreds of different groups listed where you can plug in. And, we work with a lot of these organizations, so we can kind of vouch for them.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I'll definitely look that up, and I'll invite them onto the show. Right. So obviously, you mentioned at the top 501c3, nonprofit organization. So the donation button on the top right there is click there first when you come to the site, right, and throw a couple of bucks right up there in the donate. Before you download the app. That's what we're looking at here. The app. I think that's incredible. Just out of curiosity, if you're watching this, go to the map and go zoom into your neighborhood, right? You may not be aware of, the full footprint that's within your water supply or within your, natural, sort of radius of where you live and so forth. So, that's probably a good place to start, right? You have a newsletter on here. That's really great. Subscribe to that. So, you can stay informed. So it's not just the maps. It's also, like you highlighted, you're doing reporting and writing, and it's a great way to stay engaged. Can you talk about some of the national front lines, like where are the best, most impactful ways that people can get involved to sort of hold back the advancement of fracking and pipeline expansions and so forth. What do you have any thoughts on that? Best, most impactful frontline causes that people get involved in?
That's a great question. And I think it depends on, your specific area of interest. But one thing I would advise people to do is to follow the leadership of indigenous groups in North America and globally, but just the leadership on climate and environmental stewardship that various indigenous groups across the US and in Canada are showing is just amazing. And so there's so much to learn from the ways that they engage in direct action or in influencing policy. And so I think it's really important, given that we're also colonizers essentially living on stolen land, that we first and foremost look to those frontline communities who are, alongside other people of color and low income communities, the ones who are most directly impacted oftentimes by oil and gas and petrochemical industries, and disproportionately so. So to really listen to the frontline communities and their experiences, I think is very important. And the issues, like I said, they're so broad. So finding out what really matters to you, what really connects to you, is important. And, while talking about Indigenous leadership, I think it's also important to point out that, there are so many missing and murdered Indigenous women, and there's a connection there with the fossil fuel industry. A lot of times the man camps, so-called, that are set up with temporary workers coming in are connected to this violence against Indigenous women. So, there's not a lot of good news when you're looking at these issues, but there are a lot of different ways that you can engage and get involved. And, there's a lot of amazing victories happening too. So it's important to celebrate at every chance we can get.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that. Yeah, that's, you're absolutely right. And, in the good news front, Deb Holland today picked as director of interior, right? So that is a promising step. That is a thing to celebrate. And on the international front, talking about Indigenous people and stuff, you have international data, and I have someone coming on from Amazon Watch. So this is happening on a global scale, right? And there's indigenous people everywhere, right? And the Amazon is a definite front line, and you have international resources on fractracker.org as well, right?
We do, to some limited extent. Yeah, if you're interested in that, I could definitely recommend Indigenous Environmental Network. There are a lot of different groups working on those issues. But yeah, recently I know there's been a lot of back and forth on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I don't know if you've heard much about that, but Trump is trying to roll back any additional environmental regulations or open up, more and more spaces for the oil and gas industry that he can in his final days. And so one of his areas of interest has been this Arctic refuge, which is a really important place for the Gwich'in people who are, traditionally work with or live with the porcupine caribou in that area. And anyway, it's an issue that I think we can soon celebrate, because I think Joe Biden has pretty firmly committed to protecting that area. And again, that victory is in large part due to the great work of a lot of Indigenous leaders.
Hear, hear. Yeah, there was a documentary that just came out maybe 2 months ago about that. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. Really great. Shoot, I'm drawing a blank.
Maybe it's sponsored by Patagonia. I feel like Patagonia has.
Yeah, I think so. I'll put it in the comments. Well, I mean, Shannon, what FracTracker does is amazing. It's an incredible resource. So if you're watching, this is one of those sites that you bookmark, right? You don't just go to it once. You use it as a resource, right? You use it to learn personally. You use it to pull information for educational purposes. To send to your legislator, and with a kindly worded letter if they're on the wrong side of an issue, right? I think it's incredible. Is there any other thing that you want to highlight, or ways that people can help specifically?
Well, I would say seriously reach out to FracTracker anytime. If you have questions, if you're in the media, if you want to know more about what's happening in your area, if you want to know about a certain map, you can reach out to us at any time. That's what we're here for. We're here to support, people on the ground. And so my email is smith@fractracker.org. You can reach out anytime. But, find out what the local issues are near you and what kind of legislation people are already organizing around. If you start to get concerned about, fresh water resources, there are groups that are already working on that. So look for the people who are truly grassroots, who are truly environmental justice advocates, who are centering the voices of frontline communities, and learn from them and plug into what they're doing.
Yeah. And it's so often the case that, that we have to police this industry because they're not good faith actors, and they've bought politicians at all levels, right, through donations, right? So, particularly on these frontline issues, we have to be hyper vigilant because no other cops are on that beat, so to speak, right?
Yeah. And there are such disturbing trends. I mean, as the industry is, kind of going downhill, it's flailing right now, it's getting sloppy, and it's getting, the retribution against climate activists is getting harsher. The backlash against climate activists is getting harsher, and the legislation being proposed and passed in different states is getting more and more disturbing. And so it just interrelates to so many different issues and, underpinnings of our democracy, honestly. And so I think it's really important that people pay attention to this and don't let it slide, because they're obviously a very powerful industry. But, we've seen again and again the power of people organizing. So.
And here. Yeah, Sunrise Movement is a great example of that. I've had a couple of recent guests on, just, within 2 years, that's in the national lexicon just through, just the sheer power of a social movement like that. So exactly what you're talking about. And the pushback is what you're saying, sort of anti-protest legislation and so forth. It's harrowing, right? But again, there's no other, you can't always rely on your legislators as being good faith and uncorrupted actors, right? So we need resources like you, and we need movements like Sunrise Movement and so many others that you mentioned, right? So fractracker.org, go download the app, make a donation, bookmark the site, sign up to the newsletter, share this video, like their socials, send Shannon an email. All great stuff. So it's been a pleasure to chat with you, Shannon. Thank you for all the work that FracTracker has done heretofore, and the difference you're making. It's an incredible resource.
Thank
really
you so much. I really appreciate it. This was so fun, and the Daily Bern is awesome, and you guys touch on such important issues. So we're honored to be featured on your show. So
awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Come back when you get that layer of regulatory information on there.
I'm going to write that down right now.
Right, because then you can right, then you can see you're getting data feeds, right? So then you get a feed of regulatory data, and who's in the threshold, who's out of the threshold. You can make it red and alert whoever. Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, different scores for legislators. Stay tuned.
Right.
Right.
Awesome.
Hold them accountable. Love it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you, Shannon. I will talk to you again soon. You're welcome back anytime. I love what you guys do. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Bye, all.
Bye.